Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel, Watercolor Impressions. This week we will be diving into painting an atmospheric landscape. Our inspiration comes from a beautiful spot near Park Omega near Quebec. Let's work together to capture the essence of this atmospheric landscape. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button before you go so you can stay tuned for weekly updates from my channel. Before I start painting, any kind of painting I do, I usually think about my composition first. There is a really crucial element in painting, in any kind of painting we do, because we are trying to tell a story and we are trying to grab the viewers into our painting. And you can see in the reference it looked quite dull and boring, and even though the mood is not atmospheric mood, so I want to create that mood in my painting, and I'm trying to capture the elements from the reference, as well as I'm going to add a lot of details on top of it as well. So I want to create an S-curve goes all the way to the mid-ground, so I'll be adding a barn house in the background as well, so that also act as an interesting element, and we can also have a smoke coming out of it. And I'll also add a couple of deers in the mid-ground and take us all the way into the foreground as well. On the background trees on the sky, I'll make it really easy using wet on wet and by blending and softening using watercolor techniques. And you could see I added so I also spend more time on the foreground than rest of the painting, because the foreground is the one it's really important. But as things goes in distance, we can adding less and less details that also enhance perspective and depth and distance in a painting as well as drawing. And you can see, as I said, I'm also adding the barn house. And I'm also splitting my canvas into 1/3. I'm not splitting in half. I want to make sure that it doesn't cut in half. And because equal spacing are quite boring, it's always to have asymmetrical composition and asymmetrical things in your painting. So that's all I want to talk about my composition as well as drawing. And I also kept my drawing really light, and so that when I put on the wash, we can see where everything is. So the first wash is just to kill the whiteness of the paper. So I wet the paper in the background, and I put a little bit of a tinge of blue in it. And as in the midground, I also add a little bit of warmth in it, because I want to create that glow. Even though it's not in our reference, I'm trying to have a little bit of color variation to kill the monotonous, because I don't want to have a boring painting when I finish this. In the foreground, you can see what I did is, since there's a little bit of wetness in my paper, so I'm taking a little bit of paint in my brush. I'm just splattering it on the foreground, so it kind of gives that there's a little bit of dirt and snow and sand, everything in it. And I'm also seeing a little bit of warmth in it. It's not that vibrant, but I'm also adding it just to have a little bit of color variation. And I'm also checking my mid-ground, and I'm also checking there is a little bit of a slope in there. I'll also add that as well. And as I mentioned earlier, I'll spend more details and adding details on the foreground in the rest of my painting, because I feel that whenever I do a painting, I put a lot of details on the foreground than the rest of the painting. So it also differs from artist to artist. So now I will let it dry, the foreground, since the background dried a bit. So I used yellow ochre with clean water in it, and before it dries out, I'm throwing some colors, blue, purple, and whatever colors you want. So I want to have some color variations in my sky, so I didn't do exactly as in reference, but I'll also go and flatten this out once it dries out. And I'm also flipping my watercolor paper, and I also taped my watercolor paper on a wooden thin board, so I can flip it and I can put colors wherever it is. So this is just to doing things and mixing stuff by itself, so we don't have to we can use gravity to do this for us. And as you can see, as soon as I put a paint, and it goes and blends at the top, and it does itself. And one thing I noticed that I also overworked my sky. It's supposed to be super flat because it's in the background, but if you do it, if you're following this tutorial, make sure to keep it as simple as possible. Just have a little bit of color variation where the trees are, but the clouds, make sure to keep it simple. And this is how you learn watercolors as well. Learn from your mistakes. So next time when you do a painting like this, you know that you don't have to overwork something which is not necessary. So I'm taking that background, I add a little bit of blue again, and bringing it all the way to the foreground, and I'm also blending it with my foreground so that there's a little bit of transition. And then before it dries out, and I also want some textures on the mid-crown as well. It's the same technique I showed, just splattering, taking a couple of paint and just splattering on the mid-crown. So that kind of gives that there's a little bit of texturing, and there's a little bit of snow going in and going out. So now once everything dried out, as I said, even though there wasn't a barn house, I'm just adding it because I want to have a little bit of an interesting element in the background as well. And it will be nice to have some smoke coming up from this barn house. And so now before the background dried out quite a bit, so I'm going to add the trees, and you could see the tree looks super dark, but I'm not going to make as dark, how it is there. So I'm going to add a little bit of color variation with a little bit of warmth in it. And as I said, we're going to flatten this out. In atmospheric painting, if you see any atmospheric cityscape or landscape, it gets lighter and lighter, and it gets hazier and hazier, and it kind of creates this a nice transition from the foreground to the mid-ground to the background. So that's a crucial element in atmospheric landscape painting, having the background really hazy and as well as really pale as possible, not putting vibrant colors. And it doesn't look hazy as of yet. I'll show you guys how to flatten this out once I finish the mid-crown and the foreground. And you can see I added a couple of deers, and I'm trying to make sure to block these deers in the background as well as the mid-cround as a single shape as possible, not trying to think about putting each and every details. And in the foreground, there's a deer which is in the foreground. I'm making sure to add a little bit of details for them, since they're going to be in the mid-ground, the foreground, and it also helps us to create a little bit of depth and distance. And the value is going to be darker as well. And you can see I kept the values a little bit lighter in the distance. As it comes to foreground, it's going to be darker. And this is also a first wash, and I'm just creating the shape of the deer, and it's the same concept, it's the same technique I'm going to use for the wooden water, I don't know, the wooden water station, I don't know what I have to call this. So this is where they feed water as well as food for the deer, so it is there. And I also want to mention this place is called Parc Omega, which is in Quebec, on border of Ottawa, where you can go out and feed carrots to animals like deers, and it's like they have a huge population of deers, so of different kinds, so you can also feed them. So I was there in one winter, so I really enjoyed that atmosphere. But I was thinking that when I saw the landscape, I want to create this atmospheric piece from this painting. And I had a vision then, and I want to do that vision, and I also want to share this vision with you guys as well. So now I'm doing the same thing for the deer, and one of the really hard thing to do for animals is their legs. The legs have to look like legs, but I try to keep it as simple as possible. And now I'm adding the wooden station, the wooden thing, and I'm trying to create some textures before I'm adding a darker value on it. And there's also a little bit of lighter value on it, but I'm squinting my eyes, I'm seeing like where the details go. And I also don't want to read this wooden thing as one single object. I also want to see a little bit of textures in it. As I said in the beginning of the tutorial, or beginning of this lesson, I want to make sure that the foreground gets a lot of love than the rest of my painting. And I'm now adding a darker pigment on it, and so the way I add darker pigment is just to see how dark everything is. If I squint my eyes, if you squint my eyes and see the reference, it looks like one dark shape, because since the image looks small, whereas if you have the reference a little bit bigger, and you can see each and tiny details in it, but it also simplifies the details for you when you squint your eyes. So that's one of the tip I want to I give to every one of my students, to squint your eyes when you're learning to paint, and that makes your life easier. So I'll spend some time making sure that I get all the details right, and you don't have to be put all the texturing in what I did. You can also block this as a single shape with a darker color as well. So now I'm adding mid-tones, mid-darker tones, and even when I do it, I'm squinting my eyes, checking that, make sure not to go darker, making sure everything reads pretty good. So I'll add the top ones first, and it also blends itself with the foreground, and I'll add the legs in a quick, simple stroke, not to think about anything else, not to worry about anything else. And now I'm adding the midground, and I'll just finish this the deer in the foreground, then I'll focus on in the midground. So now I'm adding the horns. I want to make sure the horns doesn't read that heavy in the midground. I want to make sure that they don't read that well compared to our foreground and the midground. So whereas the midground deer, where I'm adding the details, I'll spend more time to get some more details on it. And in the foreground, I will do the exact same thing for this guy, and I want to make sure that try to capture the essence from my reference. So you can see, as soon as we added the horns, we kind of getting closer to what it looks in the reference. So this is the one I was talking about, flattening your background. So I take clean water, and this is why I taped my watercolor paper on a thin wooden board. So now I'll flip it, and I will just throw some clean water in it. And I'm throwing some clean water on the barn house to create that smoke effect. And I just take clean tissue paper and wipe it off. And I'll dry it out using air dryer, or you can also dry it out by itself as well. And once I flip it, you could see the distance, the background went all the way far. And this is when I mentioned that I overworked my sky. I should have kept my sky really simple, but I overworked it. But as soon as we did that, you could see there is a depth started happening in our scene. So now what I'm going to do, I just have to add shadows. When I'm adding shadows, I'm trying to make sure not to go darker. Because this is a overcast scene, and the shadows will be blurrier and not darker. It will be super subtle, and even if you squint your eyes and see the reference, it's super subtle. But I want to make sure that the wooden station looks like it's sitting on a snow sand plane. So I want to make sure to capture all the details. I'm adding the shadows. I'll spend more time on it and try to get everything in it. So this is when some artists, when they paint, they get lazy when adding those things. But I used to do it when I started painting. I get lazy with my strokes, and I get lazy with my details as well. And I don't see my reference enough to capture what I'm going to paint. So it is necessary to identify your reference and translate as close as possible. But if you want to paint loose and having fun, do that. But if you want to show this painting or show an exhibition or take it to an art market, I would spend more time on it. So now I'm going to add a little bit of another darker texturing details on the foreground, and this is also an artist preference. You don't have to do what I'm doing now. You would have left the painting as it is. So this is just a personal preference, and if you want, you can push your details in the foreground. And I'm also trying to create some plains of plains of snow. I want to create some slopes and everything, so the midground doesn't look really weak. And once I've done it, then I'll add those leaves or the dried grass on the foreground. But if you see the reference, the dried grass looks a little bit darker, and it also looks a little bit of brownish. So what I'm going to do, I want to have some little bit of color variation, so I'm using a little bit of red and burnt amber in it. So that kind of gives this a little bit of color variation, just to kill the monotonous in our painting. So whenever we paint, every artist sees colors differently, and we also put colors as it impresses. So keep that in mind. So even if it doesn't look as closest to your reference, It's okay to, you know, put whatever colors you want, but at the end, capture the essence of the scene, as well as try to push the background as far as possible to create that atmospheric mood in our painting. So now I'm adding the twigs and couple of details here and there, and as I said, it's my preference and you don't have to do that as well. And if you want to get all the details, you can do that as well. And I'm just trying to flatten this out. And I'm also trying to have a couple of slopes in my snow as well. And there's a couple of big rocks there, I want to add that. And a couple of smaller rocks, I also add that as well. That also creates a little bit of variation in our foreground as well. And you can see it doesn't look as close as to a reference, but it looks better in our painting. So as I said, I'm just going to add a couple of smoke coming out of that barn house, so it kind of looks like an interesting element. And now I'm going to add the eyelets using white paint, and I also want to make sure that the wood station digs into the snow. Now it's kind of like floating, but as soon as I took a little bit of Chinese white and I tried to create some slopes from it, and as soon as I add that, it kind of looks like the wooden station dug in the snow and there is snow inside as well. So to summarize everything, in order to create atmospheric landscape, make sure to layer the washes to convey depth and mood. But begin with a light sketch as possible, then apply light wash in the distant elements, and also flatten it using clean water as I showed you guys in this video. And make sure to use a lot of wet on wet techniques, a lot of soft blends to get the diffuse edges, as well as use cool colors and a little bit of warmer colors in the foreground. And also create a lot of textures in the foreground, so it creates depth and distance and takes the viewer into the painting. And I always tape my painting to know how my painting gonna look like at the end, and I think it rather came out nice. Thanks again for watching this atmospheric landscape painting tutorial. Please feel free to share your thoughts on the video in the comment section below. If you have any other topics related to watercolors that you'd like me to cover, please reach out to me at watercolorimpressions@gmail.com or leave a comment down below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for weekly uploads. And share it with your fellow artists, friends and family. And good luck with your painting, folks.